Finlay and welcome to my June wrap-up. If you are new here, please make sure to subscribe to my channel for a weekly bookish content. If you are not new, then you know every month I do a wrap-up where I talk about all the books that I read during the month. In the month of June, I actually had my second best reading month of the year. I actually read 10 books and I've been averaging about 7 books a month, so I did a little bit better than normal this month. Unfortunately, it was a good reading month in terms of quantity, but not really in terms of quality, as you'll see by the ratings of all of these books. I'm gonna go over some stats quickly, but I'm not gonna go through as many as I have been doing recently, just because I've been getting a little bit bored with them, and I do find them to be a little bit repetitive each month. But as I said, I did read 10 books, and my monthly average in terms of rating was 3.9, which I know I said I had bad ratings. I guess when I say the average, it doesn't sound that bad, but it just seems like I was reading a lot of lower rated books this month. In terms of pages read, I read approximately 3,499. For genre, I read 1 contemporary, 1 fantasy, 1 historical fiction, 1 horror, 2 mysteries, 1 romance, and 3 thrillers. In terms of format, I read 6 audiobooks and 4 physical books. In terms of audience, I read 4 adult books, 1 new adult book, and then 5 young adult books. In terms of race of the authors I read from 4 Asian authors, 1 Latinx author, and 5 white authors. So yeah, that's just a little sneak peek at my reading. Okay, as always, I'm going to talk about the books from my least favorite to my favorite. Starting out, we have The 10th Circle by Sarah Faring, and I'm going to direct you to the vlog that I read this book in. It was basically where I read the lowest rated books on my Goodreads TBR, so I'll definitely link that if you want to go watch and see my in the moment thoughts. But going into this one, I did kind of suspect it to be bad because it was the lowest rated book on my TBR, but I still kind of had hope for it because the synopsis of the book sounded so interesting and so different from what I normally read. So basically, we're following this young teacher in, now I'm forgetting the year, it was like the 70s or 60s or some sort of past time, and she was working at this all-girls boarding school, and then some weird things started going on. It seems like some of the girls might be getting possessed. There's some sort of like haunting, paranormal stuff going on, and I don't read a lot of paranormal thrillers, so I was very intrigued by this. However, I don't want to spoil, but like I don't really recommend reading it anyway, so I'm just gonna say there's like a huge plot twist at the end of the book that I think I will admit I did not see it coming, but it was just such a weird direction and shift for the book. I just didn't really like it, so I ended up giving it 2.5 stars. Not a terrible rating, like you could get through it, I'm sure, but it was just such a weird book, and I think it's a make or break thing of if you liked the twist or not, and I leaned more towards not really liking it. Next up, we have There's Someone Inside Your House by Stephanie Perkins, and I read that for that same reading vlog that I mentioned. This is a YA thriller. You may recognize Stephanie Perkins' name. She wrote Anna the French Kiss and some other contemporary novels that I loved as a teen, so I was really excited to read her YA thriller, and unfortunately I did not love this either, but it was a very quick, easy read to get through, so because of that I did give it 3 stars. But essentially this is a version of like a teen slasher movie in book form. There is this character Makani who has been living with her grandmother in this small town. She's still relatively new to the town. She has a traumatic past which is alluded to. There's kind of a mystery there of like why she ran away from her old town and moved to this one. And then a bunch of her high school peers start being murdered, and so that is why it's like a slasher and a bit of a murder mystery of who is killing these teens and why. It seems like they are targeting a bunch of teens in different cliques or different friend groups throughout high school. The reveals were not great. I think it's pretty much just if you do want that slasher vibe where you get to see the killings, but even those weren't that interesting or that gruesome or anything. It is better than the movie though. I wouldn't recommend the movie. Another 3-star read for me this month was A Sky Beyond the Storm by Sabaa Tahir. This is the 4th and final book in the Ember and the Ashes series that I have been reading. As you might or might not know, I gave all the previous books a better rating, either like a 4.5 or a 4. I've really been enjoying it, and unfortunately this book was definitely the worst. It's like a fantasy dystopian YA series that goes with a lot of fun tropes at the beginning, kind of inspired by Hunger Games with the competition and stuff like that. But as the series went on, it just strayed further and further away from that and became something else that I didn't enjoy as much. But normally Saba's writing kept me engaged and the characters kept me really interested. But unfortunately in this one, I was really not jiving with one of the main characters' points of view. There still are characters that I really like in this one, but a lot of my favorite characters get killed off, and there's just a lot of decisions that are made that I really just didn't like. And there's a lot of things with the mythology that was not really talked about in the previous books and then just really talked about in this one, and it's just such a shift where I just wish there would have been better like continuity between the books. There were also some certain storylines that didn't have as good of a payoff as I wanted them to have for this to be the conclusion. So unfortunately this just had to be a 3-star. But overall I would say I enjoyed the series, but just mostly the first book. Next up we have the book that I read for Buzzwordathon, and the theme for this month was to read a book with the word all in the title. So I decided to go with All the Fields by Olivia Dade. This is the follow-up or like companion novel to Spoiler Alert, and if you don't know, they are adult romance books, and they all have sort of like a nerdy or like geeky twist to them, because essentially the main actor or main guy in both books is an actor on a show that is basically a Game of Thrones like parody show. So in this specific one, we are following Alex, who is best friends with the character in Spoiler Alert and his co-star, and he is more of like the troubled bad boy actor, and in fact he actually got in this public fight recently. So because of that, the like producer of the show assigns him like a handler to watch over him and kind of babysit him before the final season of the show comes out, so he doesn't like get a bunch of negative publicity or like spoil the show or anything like that. So the romance is between him and that girl Lauren, I think her name is. She is actually a like therapist who kind of needs a break from her job, so she figures it'll be kind of like a cushy job to watch over this Hollywood hottie. I gave this 3.5 stars and I actually quite enjoyed it. I actually enjoyed it quite a bit more than Spoiler Alert. That one just wasn't really the right fit for me. I know it was for a lot of other people. They really liked that one, but this was way more my thing. The romance is a lot more of a slow burn. There's a lot of time spent developing the friendship between Alex and Lauren and their connection. It's such a fun dynamic between the two, because Alex is that super over the top, charismatic, outgoing character. He actually suffers from ADHD, so he has a lot of energy, and there's also some of that ADHD rep if you're interested in that. And then Lauren is a lot more of the calm, collected, quieter type. Seeing their interactions is really cute. Lauren is also plus sized, as that's again something that the author specializes in writing about. There is still the fan fiction elements in this book, but I would say it's definitely less, and I was kind of grateful for that because I don't overly love the fan fiction stuff where like the characters are writing it. But yeah, overall this book really did impress me, and I think even the end of the book conflict and stuff, like all of it was done very well, and I would highly recommend this as a romance. Another 3.5 star that I read was It's Not Summer Without You by Jenny Han. As you might remember from my TBR, I'm trying to make my way through the whole The Summer I Turned Pretty series since the TV show came out this month, which I also did watch. Basically, it's about this teen girl who always goes to this summer house with her family and her mom's best friend's family. She has this great, relationship with the mom's friends' sons. When she hits puberty and she's like 16, she kind of like gets pretty, and then some romantic feelings start to develop more between her and the sons, and there's this sort of love triangle, but there's also a lot more to the story as well. A lot of focus on friendship and family and loss and all this kind of stuff. It's very much like a coming of age YA contemporary thing. This second book was pretty good. Unfortunately, I read the first one. I don't remember what I would have rated it. I don't think I was rating books at the time. But this one was very much like a fun, quick, easy breezy read, but nothing like overly special. I feel like I almost enjoyed the show more than the books, to be honest. But the books are still good, and I do look forward to reading the third book. But I'm a little nervous with how the second book ended. And I've also heard that the third book's the worst, so we'll see. Then I also read Genuine Fraud by Lockhart, and and I also gave this 3.5 stars. This is another YA mystery, I would call it, more than a thriller, but we are following Jewel, and she is this young woman who is impersonating her friend named Imogen. And at the beginning of the book, we just sort of see her impersonating her friend and kind of on the run for some reason. And then the book is told in like a backwards timeline. We're going back to see how Jewel got into the situation, and we're seeing how she actually met Imogen and their friendship and learning more about Jewel's past. Kind of hard to explain anything more than that. I thought this was okay. It was pretty short. I kind of wish it was a bit longer. I delved more into the plot. But I do really enjoy E. Lockhart's writing. They also wrote We Were Liars. I feel like it's very easy to read, very quick. Also has like something sort of beautiful to it. I do think the message and kind of like the twist in this was pretty cool. So I would recommend it if you were considering it. But you know, there's definitely probably better mysteries out there, but I do think this one was kind of a cool book. And I also read that for the reading blog that I have already linked and talked about. Then I read For Aunties and a Funeral by Jessie Q. Sutanto, and I also give this one 3.5 stars. I don't know why I was obsessed with rating things 3.5 stars this month. This is the sequel to Dial A for Aunties, which I read last year, and I thought it was so funny and so great. I think I gave the first one 4 stars. I still really enjoyed this one, but I just enjoyed it a little bit less, so that's why I rated it a little lower. But if you don't know, in the first book, main character Maddie accidentally kills someone, and then the body ends up at this big wedding that her and her family are putting on. So her mom, and a few of her aunties have to try and get rid of this body and like cover up a murder. Meanwhile, they're also putting on this huge wedding. It's very much like a cozy mystery, except that there's no mystery, but it still has that vibe of like dealing with crime and also a lot of hilarious things. In this book, we are following another wedding. This time it is Maddie's wedding, and once again there's like murder and shenanigans that are going on at this wedding. It always gets very crazy, but it also is always very fun and ridiculous. It reads like it would be a movie, and you can really visualize that being a movie as you read it. I would really recommend it if you just want like a fun time, but you don't take things too seriously because it does get very crazy. Another book that I read was Last Night at the Telegraph Club by Malinda Lowe. This was actually for my book club that we do, or that I do with my friends. I didn't realize this is actually a YA book. I thought it was adult based on the title mentioning like a club, but it is YA, and it is about this young Chinese American girl in the, what's with me forgetting the timelines? I think it's the 70s. She is queer, and obviously that's not okay. At that time, there's, you know, a lot of political things going on. This book is also around when the like Red Scare was going on, and there's a lot of talk of like deportation and stuff like that that the main character Lily is dealing with, on top of the fact that she is realizing that she has a crush on her friend that is a girl, and they decide to go to this Telegraph Club late at night, which is sort of this place that queer women can go to be themselves and to meet others in this secret community. This was really good. I gave it 4 stars. I guess what it was just lacking was the fact that it was YA, so I wish that it would have went a little deeper, maybe gotten a little darker, been a little longer, especially considering the content of this novel is focused on a pretty like serious topic. But I did think it was really valuable for me to read. The author clearly did a ton of research. There's actually a whole section at the back where the author really goes into more of the history and more of her research and stuff like that. So I think it's a really important read. And then the romance was also super cute, as you can imagine. I still feel like I haven't read a ton of sapphic stories, so I'm definitely wanting to read more and more of those types of stories. And I think it was also especially interesting coming from that Chinese American lens as well. Then one of my other favorite books that I read this month and gave 4 stars to as well was Finlay Donovan Knocks 'Em Dead by Elle Cosimano. This is the sequel to Finlay Donovan is Killing It, which I read earlier this year. It is another cozy mystery that again gets absolutely ridiculous. I did read this back to back with the Aunties book, I probably should have spread them out, but obviously I did enjoy this one more. I think because it actually has a mystery, and I really am just a sucker for a murder mystery. But if you don't know, it's following this like 30-year-old author and mother who gets mistaken for a hitman. And so in the first book, she's dealing with this murder and trying not to get caught and trying not to get killed and all this kind of crazy stuff that I can't even get into because the plot gets so wild. But there was a little cliffhanger at the end of that first book. And in the second one, we dive right into it. There's someone else who has a hit out on them, and somehow Finlay and her friend Vero, her sort of partner in crime, get wrapped into this mystery again. With both of these books, I feel like it takes me a little while to get into it. Finlay Donovan is just such an aggravating character for me, and I think some people out there must agree because she just makes so many dumb decisions, especially when she's in these like life or death situations. And not to mention she is an author and she just like refuses to write her book, and it honestly is a little bit anxiety inducing because I'm like, girl, can you please just write your book and meet your deadline so you can get paid? So that's kind of always the case at the beginning, but then once the plot gets going, as I've already said, it gets so crazy and ridiculous that I just feel like it does get pretty addicting and does move pretty quickly because you're constantly getting these kind of reveals and just wondering how it's all going to end. There is a love triangle, and I have to say I really don't like Nick. I hated him in the first book and I thought we were done with him, and he is back in this book. I don't like him. He's pretty sus to me as well. I'm really rooting for Gillian in this whole situation. Just putting that out there. Let me know what you thought if you read it. And then my favorite book of the month has to be Sharp Objects by Gillian Flynn or Gillian Flynn. This is the first book I've read from her, but I assume you recognize her name as she's the author of Gone Girl. This is a thriller. It's pretty short and I read it so quickly I had to put it as my favorite book of the month. It's a very dark and disturbing book though, I will say that. We are following our main character Camille, who is a journalist, and she gets sent on a mission or like a story back in her hometown, which she has not really gone back to in a long time, and she stays with her mother, who she's pretty estranged from, and then she has her stepfather and her like half sister that also lives there, and she's investigating or reporting on these murders that have been going on in the town regarding some young girls. So we're dealing with that current mystery, and then we're also getting little like tidbits, I guess, about her past, and we're seeing how it was growing up for her in this household and how it is with now being back. I'm being very vague, but essentially it's a murder mystery, but it deals with a lot of like mental or like psychological stuff as well. Definitely like triggers galore. Like definitely look into the triggers if you think you might be affected by that. But basically I am like really wanting to read the rest of her books. I know there's Gone Girl, which I have seen the movie, so I kind of know what's gonna happen, but I still think I would like to read that just based on how good this was. And then she has another one called Dark Places, I think. So I really want to get my hands on those after reading this. It was really good. It's interesting because sometimes I would be like, oh, is Gillian Flynn problematic? Like the way that she's making these characters think. And then I have to kind of realize like, no, the characters are just really messed up. It's the characters, it's not her. So very kind of like traumatized, morally great characters in this one. But it was my favorite book of the month at 4 stars. So those are the books I read in June. As you can see, it's quite a few shorter books, so it's probably why I read more. But you can also see how like my ratings skewed to be lower. So hopefully going into the next month, it will be more successful in terms of ratings. But thank you guys for watching. Let me know if you have thoughts on any of these books, and let me know how your reading month went as well. Follow me on Goodreads to keep up with my reading in between videos, and I'll see you in my next video.